This is 120 medium format film. But what is medium format film? Basically, it's this roll format film that's anything that's larger than your standard 35mm camera, like this old Nikon F SLR. 35mm film being 35mm across and characterized by these little sprocket holes which the camera uses to pull the film through the camera. Now, as you can see, medium format film is quite a lot bigger. Rather than 35mm, medium format 120 film measures in at 62mm high. But why am I talking about medium format film? Now, this is a really common type of film. Basically, every camera, when we say is medium format, we're almost universally referring to the 120 format. If you have a look at this chart, there's a type of film that's between 35mm and 120. And that film is 127. At 46mm tall, 127 film is obviously bigger than 35mm, but quite considerably smaller than 120 film. Now, I actually own quite a few cameras that shoot 127 film. You've got some really old, cool Art Deco type cameras like this little kind of bellows folding camera with these like arms on it, which is just so awesome. We have super old turn of the century cameras like this old Kodak folding camera. And then we have, which I'm most excited about, this, a Rolleiflex 127 camera. Now, I've only just come into possession of this camera, and I'm not even sure about where it sits in terms of when it was released and kind of like the era or even like the level of Rolleiflex that it is, like, you know, was it professional, was it consumer, all that kind of stuff. But this was given to me along with loads of other cameras by my good mate Paul, who has a YouTube channel called Happy Gilder. I'll link to him in the description, and I don't know if there's like a little button around here somewhere. But he's a very good friend of mine, and he's given to me a bunch of cameras, and a lot of them, or at least a considerable proportion of them, are 127 cameras. Now, this is a somewhat of a dead format. It's not, but it's not technically dead. You can still buy rolls of 127 film, but it's from very niche indie labs and stuff like that. And sometimes you're running in at around £20 for a single roll of film. And that's obviously just a little bit unsustainable, right? I want to shoot 127, but I don't want to buy 127. So what I'm going to do is take 120 film, and we're going to create a splicer and a device so we can spool our own 127 film. Basically cut this down to this. Mind you, this all has to be done in the dark, and I've never done it before, so this should be fairly interesting. Now, I was inspired of how to do this on a website called Art Deco Cameras, and thankfully whoever runs that website has listed all the dimensions for both the film and the backing paper of 127 film. They also included a picture of a splicer that they had built themselves, where you basically insert 120 film and pull it through, and it will cut it into the correct size for 127. So taking inspiration from that, I've gone ahead and designed my own splicer, and I've also designed another tool that hopefully will help me, or at least give me a better chance of doing this properly in the dark. Now, to help me pre-visualize this stuff before I actually build it, to try and get my head around how it's going to work, I've gone ahead and actually created it in 3D on the computer. What I have here is basically this strip of paper. This represents the roll of 127 backing paper once we've cut it out of the 120. So looking at the Art Deco Cameras website, we can see the exact dimensions that we need to cut it to. Now, of course, this is the easiest part of the whole process because we can do it during the day. So all we need to do is just cut this down to 1080mm long and 46mm high, and then just cut some tabs in, which are 15mm from like here to here, so fairly easy to do. We basically what we're going to have to do is, once we have this backing paper, we're going to have to, in the dark, pull the film through a splicer, get the right amount of film out, and then attach it to this paper. So really the issue we're trying to solve here is, how do we do that in the dark? We can't have obviously any visual reference points, so what we need to do is set up a situation where we can do all this just by feel. So this is what the film is going to look like once it's on the paper. This is 46mm high by 650mm, I believe. But what we need to do is we need to place this bit of film directly here, which is 28 centimeters from the start, or at least from the first tab, I should say. So I was thinking easiest way to do that is basically in the light we can roll these, get two spools and roll them together to the point where it's just about where the film needs to be. And now we can like get this peg here and have that as you know, a reference point for where the film needs to start. But of course we can't just have it out laying on the table, because it does this. It rolls around, it all curls up. So I thought about having some sort of platform. I thought the easiest thing is just like some L bracket with little tiny slots that are going to hold the that can kind of like hold the film spool in place. This whole backing wall here, the idea of it was so I could have something to a reference point to have the film pushed up against, so I knew that once the backing paper was flush against the back of the jig, my film could just sit on top. But then that got me to thinking it's going to be really difficult to roll this back in on itself, because 127 spools have these tiny little nibs here, which, you know, 120 film doesn't. So I kind of had to redesign it, and what I come up with was, rather than having a back of the jig like an L sort of shape, what I decided to do was actually just have a raised platform. Now this raised platform is going to be exactly the same size as the piece of film. So in the light, what I'll do is have, again, the two spools, roll the paper out onto the raised platform, exactly the point where the ridge over here of the raised platform, that's going to act as my guide point for where the film needs to start. And then the raised platform, I can run my fingers along, holding the film in place, tape it up here, and then all I have to do is release this part of the spool from the peg, and then just like roll it down, like winding the film up on the spool as it gets to the end. That's the plan. The film splicer itself, what I'm going to do is just look at the original design that the person on Art Deco cameras designed, and just try and replicate that. I guess we should head to the shed and yeah, try and build something. So the platform I used to hold the film and the backing paper was this sort of hard foam board. I used it because it was super smooth on top and had a nice density to it that I thought would just lend itself to being like a light but rigid platform. And you can see here I've cut it to length to directly fit that little 127 spool on. Here I'm just lining up the backing paper to make sure it fits okay, and everything was great. I then needed to make the base plate to hold this all in place, so my first thought was just using some plywood. I got a piece that was relatively straight, and sanded it down, cut it to size so I could have enough room for the clips on the edge. But during this process I basically just tried to straighten it out, and this happened. So yeah, not very good, so getting rid of that. I actually found around the shed this really nice piece of mahogany, which was very straight, and I was kind of glad that I broke the piece of plywood because it actually ended up looking a lot cooler. So I cut this to size and started to use that as my base plate. These are the little clips I'm going to attach to the end of the base plate to hold the spools in place. But first of all, I just need to attach that raised platform in order to hold the film above the base plate so I could easily roll up the film later on. Now, being 47mm, it's actually quite a tricky size, so a little trick there is to take a measurement that's easily divisible by 2. I used 5, and basically line it up so you have to mark 2.5 instead of trying to directly split something awkward like 47mm. Then I just drilled holes and obviously screwed it to the base plate. Here I'm just attaching those little paper clips. They're those standard kind of foldable, collapsible paper clips, so nothing fancy there. Just holding it in place with a screw and a couple of washers. And you can just see that that just holds the backing paper nicely against that top plate. Next up, I needed to get the materials for the splicer itself. And really all I did here was just cut a bunch of material, both plywood and hard foam board, at the same dimensions as 120 film. Just tons and tons of little bits. I had enough to make 2, so I could pick the best parts. And then just sanding them down, and it was time for assembly. Right, so I've cut all the pieces that I think I need. Now, admittedly, I'm not 100% sure on how the film splicer is going to be assembled. I have this like rough idea in my head, but I think looking at the design on Art Deco cameras, I've tried to just make a more, I guess, precise version of that. It's going to kind of, in my head, it's consisted of 2 sides with this base plate. The base plate is the same size as 120 film. And then what we're going to have is, I've got this like hard foam, which is really smooth on top. That's hopefully going to stop the film from scratching. So I had that on top. Now on top of that, I need some way to hold the blade. So from the same material, I've got these 2 sections. This one is 46mm and this one is 16mm. And the idea being that when they're inside, that's where this tiny little razor blade is going to be housed, in here somewhere, kind of sandwiched between. Something like that, right? And then on top of that, we'll have that's where the film's going to go. So there's our 127 film coming out that way, and the 16mm film will come out that way. Now, the 16mm film, I don't think is actually, I can't use it yet. I know there are some little, I think little Minox cameras that take 16mm roll film. Maybe one day I can get my hands on one of those, and the 16mm film that comes off here I can actually use. But in the meantime, those offcuts I'm going to use for testing fixer and stuff like that. And it's always handy to have spare film kicking around for testing purposes. But anyway, that's kind of like the base. The 120 film, as I said, is going to go in there. And then on top we need essentially the reverse. So there's the top, the exact distance that has to be, I'm not 100% sure on yet. It needs to be close enough that the film doesn't wriggle around, but obviously not too close that you can't actually pull the film through or scratch it. The height of the razor is going to need adjusting because it's still too deep for the depth of these 2 bits of foam together. And then I just repeated the top, what was on the bottom, so then I've just got another bit of foam, hard foam on top, and then again repeated this. So with the razor blade set in there, somehow, the complete thing is going to look a little bit similar to that. And then of course I'll cut this top section off to whatever height it needs to be. But the idea being, you just pull the film through, it'll be something like, so once everything's kind of set in there, the idea being that you'll pull the film through and it will actually cut the film as I pull it out, like that. Yeah, I'm just gonna now go through, first of all, sand, because there are some little rough edges from where some of the cuts have been made, which I need to get rid of to stop film being scratched. So I'll sand it, start putting this together, and yeah, see how it goes. Okay, well here we are. I have made the final jigs. We have the splicer and we have this kind of guide piece for helping us put the film onto the paper. But before that, we need to cut the paper itself. So I'll get this out of the way. Now to make the paper, it's going to be relatively easy, right? We have this roll of 120 film. This is, I think, 1,400 millimeters long, 1,500, something like that. So about 1.5 meters. And what we need to do is cut it down to the 47 millimeters of the 127 spool. So I'm going to simply just lay this out as best I can and mark as precise as I can if I had a pencil. Probably be easier this way. Now, if anyone's thinking, well, why don't I just use the splicer to do this? The reason is, even though it's only a millimeter difference, the film is cut at 46 millimeters and the backing paper is 47. Now, it might not sound like a lot, but that is crucial, that half a millimeter on either side of the film helps protect it from light. In time, maybe I'll make a backing paper slicer or splicer, but as of right now, I'm just going to do it by hand. I'm lining all this up, so I'm actually just going to cut straight across. So yeah, just get yourself a really sharp Stanley blade or a craft knife, or where are my markings? There and there. Okay, so there's the width sorted out. What we need to do now is actually cut it to length. Now, 127 runs from end to end, so the complete length of the film is 1080 millimeters. And at each end, as you can see on this image on the Art Deco website, the tabs to go into the spool is like a 15 millimeter square kind of configuration. So what I'm going to do is actually just cut this off flat at one end by cutting that to help keep it square with these lines. Like 0 here. And there we have our end tab that can fit nicely in the 127 spool. And the paper rolls around nice inside there. So now all that's left to do is to pull this out to 1080 millimeters, cut it off flush, and then repeat what we did on this side. Cool, so here we are. We now have our backing paper, 2 127 spools, pair of scissors for later, a roll of 120 film, which I'll grab soon, and we have both the splicer and the kind of jig for putting the film on the backing paper. I'm going to cover this jig first, so I'll set that aside. I'll show you how we set this up. So as you're seeing me right now, everything will be done in the light, so you can do this with the lights on. It's not going to ruin anything. You'll notice that earlier we put a little start position on the backing paper. That's where our film is going to start. Now what we're going to do is just get our first spool and start wrapping the film, or I should say, start wrapping the backing paper around the spool. And you want to roll it so the black side is on the inside of the roll and that the numbers are on the outside. Now just keep rolling this until we get to this start line. What we're going to do is place this, and we're just going to pull it ever so gently until that start line is in line with the ridge of the edge of this raised platform here. And all I'm going to do is just put a crease along that black line. There we have it. Now we'll release it, twist it over, and place that crease directly on the edge of that white kind of guideline. We're now going to run the backing paper all the way down to the end, where we'll grab our second spool. We don't have to worry about the position of the anything because we've taken care of that down here. And we just pull it somewhat tight and clip it into the second one. Just make sure nothing's come out of place. And now we have this, which is going to be super handy in the dark, because once we have our spliced film, all we have to do is find the edge of this thing here, place a bit of tape on the edge of the film, pull it out, and then wind this back in. What we're going to do now is just quickly show you the splicer. So here it is. The design changed a little bit from the way I thought it was going to be in my head. So we have very similar construction to what was going to be original, but it's just changed ever so slightly. So it breaks down into, I guess, 4 parts. I'll break it down now so you can see it. We have the base part here, which is a construction of plywood and has 2 grooves, and 2 bits of the white polyboard. One is 46mm and the other one is 16. And there's a gap in the middle which houses the other side of the razor blade. I've also added this beveled bit of wood here, which I've sanded down so it's really smooth, and that's just going to help the film, as you pull it off, just try and not scratch it against the surface and stuff like that. Next part, kind of like, it's two parts but it's kind of one, and this is where the razor blade sits. Now there's a screw holding the razor blade on this bit of foam board. Because it's in the middle, the razor blade actually wanted to rotate, so really low-tech solution, I've just applied a little bit of masking tape to the edge of the razor blade, and that holds it in place really nicely. But if I wanted to change this blade, all I have to do is just take the paper off, unscrew it, put a new one on. But obviously, because these are double-sided, I can rotate that before I have to change the blade. Now there is a tiny little edge coming out from the screw, so all I've done to compensate for that is I've drilled out a small hole, the same diameter of the screw, and they just fit together really nicely. This then slots into the actual splicer itself, and you can see that the blade on the bottom fits really nicely and just butts up against this beveled section here. Now the beveled section, while it does act as a kind of nice kind of surface for the film to come out of the splicer, it also holds this foam board in place, because what I was finding, the resistance on the blade, even though it's like a razor sharp blade, the resistance of the film being pulled through it wanted to pull this forward, so this also acts as like a little butt stop. Then the last piece is just the lid, or I guess the top of the splicer that just holds the film flat. And all I've done is just cut a small slit in there that just accepts the razor blade on the top, like so. So operation of this in the dark, and I'm going to demonstrate this with some backing paper to begin with, just so you can get kind of like a feel for it, is to take the top off, grab your film, place it in here. Now it's a little bit tight because obviously this is designed for film, not for the backing paper. And also remember, the film coming off the 120 film is longer than the film you need. So if you're grabbing this part of the film, don't worry too much about it, because you're actually going to be cutting it off anyway. Just try and remember which side of the film it is. The way this kind of works is I place the film on top of the razor blade. Obviously you're going to be in the dark, so be careful if you're going to do this. I then lightly rest the top on, and I start pulling as I start applying a little bit of pressure to the top of the block. Now as you can see, it's already started to cut through. Just get this focused on there so you can see. And all you have to do is just simply start pulling, which is super satisfying. I'm not going to do this whole backing paper roll because I've already got too many pieces of 46 and 16mm backing paper kicking around. But you can see here it's split in half, and all we've got to do is just pull the rest through, and there we have it. So that would act as our spliced film. At this point, you'd probably want to grab this. Again, this is all in the dark. You want to find the front, and again, being careful, cut the start of the backing paper off, or the film, pull it out, and now at this point it's still going to be too long, right? So what you want to then do is find the front of the film over here, find that little lip, apply your masking tape, pull it along. Now of course this in reality would be much longer, probably be over here somewhere. Now as the film kind of has the excess over here, what you want to then do is find the back bit of this raised platform, get your scissors, and really carefully, because you don't want to cut through your backing paper, you want to find in between the film and the backing paper and cut right at the end there. Of course this is all really easy to say while it's during the day and I can see everything, but we'll see what happens when we're actually in the dark room later. But imagine that this would be the film and this is all the way along there. You've now got it taped down there. The idea being this shouldn't do that because it's taped, but we'd then release the spool, and when it reaches the end, tuck the film under the spool, and then you start winding. And the beautiful thing about this raised platform is the edge of the spool sits really nicely on the edge, and all you have to do is start rolling up. All the way along, keeping your film nice and straight along with the lines of the this raised platform. And as you get to the end, you can then release the first spool and then just transfer the remaining paper over to the original spool. And theoretically we should have a roll of 127 film. So that's everything kind of during the daylight, where you can see what's going on and I can see what's going on. I'm now going to turn off all the lights in my dark room and try and do this completely in the dark. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see this, of course, because I can't have any lights on, but I might leave my mic on and just maybe if there's anything worth saying, I guess I'll go through it. Okay, so I think I'm ready. Here's the setup. I've got, as shown in a little bit previous, this jig here. I've got the splicer here. I've got a couple of bits of tape, just in case the first one fails. And I'm going to be using this expired 400 ISO Tri-X. And then I've also got the scissors here, just above where I need to cut it. So yeah, time to turn the lights off and see how this goes. Unwinding the backing paper. I'm going to peel that tape off. Okay, film is cutting. Try and pull it out as straight as I can. Okay. Oh my god, that felt so weird. Oh, that does feel alright. Which is, it hung back. Pinged. So I'm now rolling the film up. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, I think that went relatively well. Tiny little hiccup right at the end where the film was taped on. It felt like the corners of the film were just lifting off the paper slightly, like it was trying to curl in on itself along its length. I guess it's a slight concern because it could potentially get caught up in the camera as it's being wound through, but we'll see. But anyway, roll of 127. Very surprised how easy that was. And there we have it. Last thing to do is just to put a little bit of tape over the film, just to stop it from unspooling. It's very curly. Probably has something to do with the how old the film is. But we now have a full roll of 127. A couple of issues that might crop up. Potentially the film isn't perfectly cut. While I tried to make this as close to 46 and 16 millimeters as possible, of course there is ever so slight wiggle at some point, or I might have not pulled it exactly straight, which could have skewed the film. And then also the backing paper might not be cut absolutely 100%, where there might be tiny little leaks that get in through here. So I'll be interested to see what the results look like. But if you want to see how this roll of 127 turns out, click on the video somewhere in this screen or in the description below, because what I'm going to be doing is shooting it through this old Rolleiflex 127. And to be honest, this is the whole reason I made this video, is to shoot, well, actually not just this camera, but a whole bunch of other 127 cameras that I have. So if that sounds interesting, head over to that video. Should be up now, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm super excited to go shoot it. But thanks for watching. Consider liking and subscribing. A small channel like this, honestly, the subscriptions and the likes do so much in pushing this out to more people, and in talking about more people as well. If you think anyone might like this video, one of your friends or family member, please do send them a link and see if they like it. Yeah, all that kind of stuff really helps out a super young and budding channel like mine, like Pixel and Grain. So I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.